Well, hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening as well, depending on when you're watching this. My name's Julian.
And my name's Libby.
Welcome to the Ascent Leadership Podcast, where we are talking all things mental health tonight with our wonderful guest, Lydia Daubney. And hopefully these are going to give you, these conversations are going to give you some tools as a youth leader, as a youth minister, not only for you, but also to help you minister to your young people. So a big hello to Lydia. How's it going?
Hey.
Good. I'm good, thank you guys. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Good.
We're looking forward to get stuck into a conversation, but we'd love to find out just a little bit about you, Lydia. So we've got some questions prepped and a few little kind of icebreakers just to find out a little more about you. Libby, what have we got first?
Cool. So first up, we just want to give you the opportunity to just introduce yourself. Let us know a bit about you, a bit about what you do, what you're involved in, and what you're passionate about.
Oh, okay, great. So you already said my name's Lydia. I'm married to a lovely guy called Adam. We have two daughters. They're 5 and 7, so they keep us very busy. I help to lead Threshold Church, which is just sort of northeast of Lincoln. We are, like most of us nowadays, online, but really a church in the community that loves God and loves people. We're really passionate. I'm very passionate that people know about Jesus, particularly young people. And so I'm very privileged that in my job, I get to work for the Christian charity, the Message Trust, and I basically lead on their schools work in Yorkshire, Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire. So as part of that, and it's just a small area, right? Just small. But I love it. I'm a school teacher by kind of trade, I guess. And so it allows me to go into classrooms and to year groups and just really tell young people that there is hope for them, that Jesus loves them, where their worth and their identity can come from, and just that they're more than where they've been or perhaps any mistakes that they've made. You know, we want them to make good choices. Ultimately, we want them to make God choices, but we're just presenting the gospel really in a way that is relevant to them. And so I do that through a PSHE program, really. It's called Respect Me. We're all over the country. We're in South Africa as well. And we offer self-esteem and sexuality education. So we do that from year 7 all the way up to year 13. I love it. I get to work as part of a fab team, and we get to bring in local church as well and support the students and also help out the staff.
So you must be obviously working on so many different things, and we're talking about mental health tonight. So a good question really is, in the middle of doing all of those incredible things, Lydia, how do you find time to unwind and relax? What are the things that help you just to chill out and look out after yourself, really?
Yeah, good question. So I think the biggest thing that I've learned in lockdown is to give myself grace. My personality type is that I'm quite goal-oriented. And so I find that difficult when there's not a lot to achieve, at least not in the normal way. And so I try and start my day with a little bit of quiet time once the kids have gone to school. As a Message employee at 9 every morning, we've got Message staff prayers. So that's always a really great thing for me. Other than that, I think it's just giving myself margin in my day is my biggest thing. I am terrible for taking on the world and then wondering why and how I can squeeze that into the 24 hours that I have. I think when you love what you do and you love people as well, it's quite easy. But I was going to say the thing that I should have mentioned earlier, which actually gives me life, is that I help lead I guess you would call it really a girls project. It's called Promise. Libby, you're part of that. Both of you guys helped out at our conference last November. Really helped make that happen.
It's really good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and the whole passion behind that really, and what helps me to kind of, I guess in a weird way, relax. Doesn't sound very relaxing, is that I try and encourage young girls to know their worth, to know their value to God, and I guess try and talk about the kind of things that we're talking about tonight, really. How to take care of yourself, practical tools and tips to help equip and encourage teens, really.
Amazing.
That is so good.
So good. So we've got some would you rather questions for you, because it wouldn't be an Ascent podcast without some would you rather questions.
It's become like our little motif at the start of every session.
It has. I've got 4 for you today, Lydia.
Okay.
So the first one is, if you were reborn into a new life, would you rather be alive in the past or the future?
Oh, such a good question. I
Well,
want to say,
yeah, depends how
this is
optimistic you are.
toughy.
That's true.
I'm going to say the future. I'm going to say the future, partly because I'm more excited about where I'm going than where I've been. I know that sounds cheesy, but I really am. I still feel more excited about the stuff that's to come than the stuff that's been. Plus, I want to see what cool tech we come up with, and also, really, truly, at the minute, I'm very excited about a world where coronavirus doesn't exist, and I figure that's coming up. So, future.
Amazing. Next one. Would you rather be able to reverse one decision you make every day, or be able to stop time for 10 seconds every day?
Oh, that's good.
This is so good. Reverse one decision.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I'd go with that one, actually, because like if you make a mistake, you can wind back 10 seconds. You've got it. You're all good.
Yeah.
I guess you've got to realise you've made a mistake, though. It's those moments when you say something, and then like a day later, you're like, oh no,
shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, very true.
Okay, would you rather have free Wi-Fi wherever you go, or have free coffee when and wherever you want?
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
I know. I really would have gone with coffee. But
coffee.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Would you go coffee?
I would, because then I could be like, do you know what, guys? I had no Wi-Fi. I couldn't respond. I couldn't. So, do you know what I mean? You let yourself off the hook a little bit.
You want your coffee unreachable, love it.
You can never escape if you've got Wi-Fi everywhere.
That's true.
So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And final one, would you rather live in an amusement park or a zoo?
A zoo, every time. I'm one of those people that I'm such a geek. If I sit down too fast, my stomach leaves me. So the thought of being in a world where I could only be on roller coasters is not great for me. But, like cute animals. Yeah, I'm up for that. Definitely the zoo, much more fun.
Amazing.
Super. So diving into the topic then of mental well-being, the first question really is that you spend a lot of time, Lydia, in schools, working with young people, not just in a youth group, not just in a church context, but also kind of, secular youth, if you like. Yeah. What would you say is the biggest challenge the whole demographic of our teenagers are facing right now? What's the biggest thing for them?
Okay, I couldn't narrow it down to one, but I have managed to get two. So for me, one of the biggest challenges that they're facing is having a safe place and a safe person to be able to talk to and open up to. So I'm answering this in the context of mental health. I think in terms of the wider challenges, we could probably be here all evening. But in terms of mental health, I think so much of youth provision is not seen as an essential service. Youth workers are not seen as key workers. And I think until that changes, our young people are not only losing freedom in their personal choices, but they're losing access to safe spaces and safe people. And for me, that's creating a vacuum. It's also creating a pressure cooker. And a lot of these mental health conversations that are happening now are not entirely new, I don't believe. I think they were going on beforehand, and sadly, COVID-19 has sort of brought those to the fore a little more. But for the amount of emerging situations or conditions that are coming out now that teachers are seeing in schools, perhaps children that were vulnerable after COVID, but perhaps weren't on the register for that before, weren't being picked up. I think the lack of these safe spaces to go to and lack of safe recreational spaces is a really big problem. I think a lot of stuff is going undetected and unpicked up because there isn't the usual amount of facility, or we can't meet the demand because the situation. The second one for me really is our online presence. I think you will know, I'm sure, teens spend a lot of their life online pre-COVID. We've just entered their space a bit more now, I think. But in terms of the increased online exposure that they're having, and perhaps that's not being regulated perhaps as much as it usually would be because families are under different pressures. I think often parents are keenly aware nowadays of what children are looking at. But I think their safety online, the way that they're representing themselves and the way that they're perhaps safeguarding or not safeguarding themselves is difficult because of the Wi-Fi. They've got 24/7 access.
Wow,
Anybody can reach them at any time, and it's not safe. So I would say for those are my main two.
Yeah,
that's huge as well, because I guess there's a level of exposure now like never before for our young people.
Yeah.
And we've always sort of said if you're not having the tough conversations in those safe spaces, then you're going to go find the answers on the internet, and the internet
Absolutely.
is a vast and sometimes dark place as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And particularly my passion is with regard to young people, their self-esteem, but also their sex and relationships. And a lot of people are finding that education, as you said, in alternative places. And they are not, with greatest respect, they're not always emotionally mature enough in their own relationships to know what is a good example of healthy sex, of a good relationship, and what isn't. And often the education they're getting is not only not accurate, but things like consent and respect are woeful in what they're kind of being exposed to. We've got a lot of young people, I think, that are with respect, if they're under 18, they've become a child in an adult environment, and that's only increased. So big concern.
Gosh,
yeah. So that leads us on really to our next question around our youth groups, and how can we cultivate a culture in our youth groups of openness and honesty about some of these issues, about mental health, about some of the other situations young people might be facing, and maintaining a healthy view of ourselves?
Right, really good question. I think Mental Health England, Mental Health First Aid, came out with a stat recently. I think it was from their 2017 publication, so maybe updated now, but that 90% of young people, so young adults 25 and below, are experiencing a negative reaction when they talk about a mental health condition or concern that they might have, whether that is diagnosed or not. And so I think a huge barrier for young people is that stigma that they anticipate they're going to face whenever they talk about it. And all that does, as we know, is bring on shame and guilt and sort of a feeling of being misunderstood. And so for me, a youth group is a place to be understood. It's a place to be seen, and it's a place to be safe. And I think it starts by modelling it all. I think if you are willing to be open and vulnerable yourself, use testimony. Everybody loves stories, right? Everybody remembers stories. And I think now more than ever, everybody can get a lot of on-time content, but just having that person that is real with you, that is invested in you and your life as you are, regardless of where you've been, what you've done, who you are, and saying, do you know what, actually I can empathise. And I think it's just remembering whenever you're in a conversation or you're creating that safe space, the focus is not you as the youth leader, the focus is the young person.
Yeah.
And so whilst empathy is great, we're listening to learn, we're not listening to respond. And so really, in a nutshell, creating that space where life is real, you're accepted as you are, make mental health and emotional vocabulary part of your normal talk. So we know, don't we, not necessarily gender specific, but some young people, they're not wired to talk about their emotions. They grew up in a context where their framework of reference is not kind of very advanced in terms of the way they connect emotionally. And so to then expect them to come do that could be quite hard for them. So to kind of recap, keep it real. Make sure that it's a safe space, that they're seen, that they're known, that they're valued for whatever they bring and however they arrive. Learn that it's not about you, that we're listening to learn. And then, we can kind of take that down whatever path is appropriate. But also be realistic in terms of your expectations.
I love that whole listen and learn thing as well. We've seen that certainly to be true with some of our young people in helping give language just by listening to what they're experiencing.
Totally.
And articulate what they're feeling can be quite a powerful thing. And that only comes through that listening and learning process.
It does, yeah. And also they're at that age where their emotional state is not yet mature and their vocabulary is not yet equipped to deal with some of the feelings that they have. So for them to even begin to talk about it with you is quite a big step for them. So making that okay is great.
That's right. We had an experience where somebody was feeling anxiety, but they didn't have a word for that. And so they started to describe those emotions that were going on. You know, it feels like I'm sick all the time. It feels like I've missed a step coming down the stairs, and all of these things around sort of stress and pressure. We said, you know, that's what anxiety is. And they were like, didn't know that's what that was. And even just putting language to it was almost like a pressure release valve. So
it's really powerful.
So, you know, our spiritual and mental well-being are incredibly closely connected. They're interwoven. Often we can separate that out, can't we? We can sometimes say, well, you know, here's just a physical or psychological thing, but we sometimes miss the spiritual side of it. But as Christians, we know they're connected. So where would you say discerning the line comes into those things? Like, how do we know the difference between what is spiritual and what is mental? Or how do we identify when those two collide or a bit closer interwoven, if you like?
Yeah, great question. We could be here for an hour, couldn't we, just talking about this? So one of the ways, I guess, that you can define, from my experience, a mental health disorder or illness or health condition, it's a diagnosable thing, basically, that causes major changes or can cause major changes to a young person in terms of their thinking, their emotional state and their behaviour. Now, thankfully, most of those, when they get help, they can recover from that, or they can learn to live despite that in a really fulfilled and productive way. But I think it's that the interesting thing about that definition for me is that it's linked to their thinking, is linked to their emotional state, which is linked to their behaviour. And so I think in one sense, we can only understand our emotions through whatever degree of logic we have. So I think it's very difficult to split apart, to start with, anything that's emotional and perhaps spiritual on that same plane from anything that is mental. I think we were created as a whole human being, weren't we? And so I think it's quite difficult to be able to separate those two. But I think consider how your young person is functioning and what is normal for them. So it goes back to knowing your young person. I think often we talk in youth work, don't we, about does their behaviour match up with what's coming out of their mouth? It's that classic thing, isn't it, of, yeah, I'm fine. And you're obviously not. You know, the whole body language is very different. So it's basic stuff like that. But how are they functioning in their wider life? And that goes down to good communication, I think, with parents and with those adults in their life that care for them. So if they're struggling at school, if they are withdrawing from social contact, if they are showing a lack of enjoyment generally for their life, then as a youth worker, I'll be looking at that young person thinking, are you okay? Now, those things we've described don't automatically signal a mental health issue. It could be bullying, it could be a peer issue, it might be a self-esteem issue, it could be something in the home environment. But I think looking at that young person and kind of looking at their day-to-day, how they function, is it affecting the rest of their life? Talk to them about it, give them that vocabulary, go out, kick a football with them, go when we're allowed, take a coffee with them, you know, do something that they're interested in. And often things that are to do with the mental, the way that we think, while they're busy, they will probably talk more freely. Whereas creating that awkward scenario of sitting in a room, looking at each other, talking about our emotions is probably not going to yield amazing results.
Very intense, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing that I would say is, I call it 3 C's for me. Look at, we've said it already, but their character. Is this normal behaviour for them? Look at their spiritual context as well. Are they new to faith? What's their home environment, their peer environment like? But also look at their context. So is this normal behaviour for them? Have they started hanging around with a different group of people? Are they looking at a particular topic in the Bible that might make them question things more than they usually would, you know? But also their culture. So character, context and culture can tell you an awful lot, I think, about whether somebody is struggling mentally or whether it's a spiritual thing. And I think often their ability to engage in anything, church-wise, God-wise, the way they pray, you know this, guys, the way that they sort of relate to God and have an affinity with that or not, can often tell you quite a lot.
That's a powerful tool. Character, culture, content or context, sorry.
Yeah. So helpful. Really good. Amazing. I think particularly when looking at a young person who's struggling, it can be such a variety of issues, can't it? That
Absolutely.
I think even just what you were saying about connecting over a coffee or kicking a football, like just talking to our young people actually can highlight so much, and we can understand them so much better just by listening.
And I guess that's where you've got to be the attentive youth. I just think back when I was sort of 14, 15, I had some serious kind of things going on in my teen life, and I had some brilliant youth leaders that just saw me, and they didn't necessarily know the details of it, but they knew enough to watch, listen, take time to walk alongside me, as you say, kick the football. Conversation
absolutely.
in those times, doesn't it? And I'm so appreciative of that.
Yeah, it really stays with you, doesn't it? When somebody makes the effort to see you, I think is a really big deal, even if they don't understand. It's good.
Excellent. So youth leaders often can feel quite alone in supporting young people through their various challenges. And practically, what can we do as youth leaders to support young people? And how can we recognise when we should be signposting or referring young people for additional professional support maybe? And are there any resources you can recommend?
That's such a good question, because often we feel out of depth, don't we?
Yeah, I feel like we've got to save a young person, but actually there's so many other people that are there to help as well.
Exactly, and you've kind of started that really nicely for me already. I think we are not their golden bullet, and we never will be, just in the same way that they are not our young people. They're God's young people.
True.
And we have that privilege of being able to kind of walk alongside them for a little bit, do a bit of life with them, and hopefully, impart some good stuff. And, you learn as much as you give with stuff like this, don't you, as well? Or I do, at least. I think one of the key things is maintaining communication. I think somebody said to me recently, it's very, very difficult to start and establish a meaningful relationship with a young person online now, mid-COVID. I think if you had those relationships before, it's a lot easier to maintain them or to keep connection, but to establish something now in a very detached way is actually really hard. And so I really feel for people that are meeting young people now in this context for the first time, because I think that makes everything we're talking about so much harder. You don't have that frame of reference for that young person. I think when you're approaching a young person, there's a few key things really. So I'm just looking at my notes, sorry. Just be there to listen, as we said. So it's about approaching and assisting, really. You're looking at them to learn. You're looking at them to be supportive and not judgmental. So it's some of the safeguarding stuff that we already come out with. It's giving support and information, not asking leading questions, not asking questions that might cause them to feel any more vulnerable than perhaps they already do, talking about whatever they feel is going on in their head. Because it could be very real to them, despite the fact that it sounds absolutely crackers to us. It's really important, isn't it? Offer professional support, and I'll give some references in a minute of places to go, really. But I think whenever you're dealing with young people, it's such a key time in adolescence for the biggest changes that they're going to go through anyway. I think it's only natural. I think we need to shift our perspective that mental health in young people that we care for is taboo, or that it is unexpected or unique. Everybody has mental health. And I think this is the key thing we need to know. Everybody is on a continuum of great to not great mental health, and there are no absolutes in that in terms of our well-being and mental health. And I think when you look at a young person that you see as a youth worker who's struggling, it is so hard, isn't it, to make a distinction. Is that spiritual? Is that peer related? Is that cultural? There's so many things going on. But actually, let's be realistic in our expectation that actually that's very normal, in a sense, for them to be questioning lots of things, to be engaging in different behaviours or increased autonomy because of their age and wanting to move out from their parents and things. And we don't even need to go into the hormonal changes, I'm sure, do we? that all of that can bring. But I think really just getting alongside them and being that listening voice, but also equipping yourself with where to signpost them to, and knowing when something cannot remain confidential. Personally, I don't think we should be offering confidentiality anyway. I think there's certain times where that's not appropriate or in their best interests. But how do we help them? We maintain communication, we maintain relationship, We don't presume what's going on with them. We listen to learn, not to respond. We approach with compassion, empathy if you've got it. I think that's always great. If you can, and the relationship and their level of understanding of God is there, refer them to the Bible rather than your own personal experience, because again, it's sometimes about us in that it's helpful and they might ask for our experience, but we're not trying to project ourselves onto them. And then encourage support, really.
That's really good.
It's very difficult, sorry guys, to give really...
Yeah, no, I think you're doing a tremendous
answers in 2 or 3 minutes. Sorry.
So much into such a small topic, or such a small amount of time, sorry. One thing you mentioned, mental health is something that everybody has, and everybody includes us as leaders. And I think often when we're caring for people, we can neglect ourselves a little bit. So how can leaders, in particular youth leaders, look after their mental health while trying to minister in these things?
Great, good question. Partly it's about making sure that if we are the support system for the young people, who is the support system for us? Who are you accountable to? Who are you in relationship with? Who is discipling and inputting into your life? So I think that's the first thing, being accountable in relationship and having your own support system. Also really equipping and feeding yourself. I think, yes, read stuff that's to do with how to help with young people, but also recognise that you are a person outside of that job and that it is legitimate and okay for you to have needs that need to be catered for. I think we often give out a lot and don't realise until we're empty, and it's not a great place to be in, is it? So accountability, feeding yourself, and also just taking time with God, taking time out, all the classic stuff, I guess, that you would hope that we would do anyway. Don't always do that, do we? But yeah, making sure that you have margin room, I guess, which is what I was saying at the start.
And I love what you said there as well about almost keeping ourselves accountable, because it's so easy to, in ministry, carry the weight on your own shoulders. And we know that God walks with us through all those things, but maybe sometimes we need to go to our peers, and especially the leaders that we are accountable to, and say, I need you to look out for me a little bit. I need you to watch for my signs of burnout and mental stress. I think sometimes we've got to be brave in those things, haven't we?
Yeah, just being honest with yourself, definitely.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much, Lydia. That has been it's been really helpful for us. We've learned loads, and I'm sure the people watching this will as well. We have each month we have a podcast, and we have 4 things that we ask the person who's talking to Lydia this month, and 4 things that we can put into practice. And the idea being that you can put one into practice each week, to help you grow and delve deeper into the topic that we've unpacked today. So Lydia, over to you.
Okay, so a few little things that you can do. 2 of these are for you as youth leaders, and the other 2 might be for the young people in your care. So the first one really is developing mentoring. Have a little look at that. I think that's something that we're trying to do with our young people, not only professionally but also personally in my work with the young ones at church. I think it's very difficult. Young people do not want to engage on Zoom, do they? It's like we finally entered their world and they're jumping ship out of it. And so it's an easy way to maintain relationship. It works with small numbers. You have accountability with that young person. And as long as you're safeguarding and all the right stuff is in place, it can be a meaningful way to still do discipleship. And often in terms of mental health, the one-to-one is where it's going to come out more rather than in a group setting. So have a look. Is that something you're providing? Is it something that's appropriate for your context? And if so, how do you do that? I've got a great friend. He's called Ben Harper, and he works as a mentor. You can check him out online. It's called Space to Breathe. He's based in Sheffield. Also check out Lily Jo. She does some amazing mentoring and one-to-one work, as well as group sessions on the kind of issues that we've talked about today. Believe it or not, that's just one thing. Okay, second thing, have a look at the Youthscape app, with the Youthscape resource, that's come out. It's called Thrive. It's really good for mental health and well-being. There's a sample online that gives you enough to get started with. Great testimonies, loads of media, advice from specialists, and activities for your teams. Third one, have a look online, check us out at YouTube. So it's the Message Trust, and the team that I work with have produced a weekly magazine show that covers hot topics post-COVID for your young people. It's called The Message Today. We're running right up until Christmas. The latest one was on purpose. It features creative arts, interviews with teens, and little short media clips as well. So that's a really good, easy one. And there's questions to follow on with your young people each week as well. And then finally, check out the Headspace app. So this is something that a lot of people are using and have been using, to be honest, for quite a little while. But it's www.headspace.com. And it's basically mindfulness, meditation principles. It's there to improve well-being. If you're an adult, you could try out Calm as well. That's pretty good. Makes me feel very tired when I need it. But they're just 4 practical things that you can go away and look at.
Amazing. So we're going to put a link in the description below to all of those things, as well as the monthly download. You can download this as a worksheet, and the idea is go through one of these each week to help feed your ministry, to feed your soul, and to help you be empowered in all that you do. Was there anything else you'd like to highlight for us, Lydia, as well? Where can we find out more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, great, thank you. So I mentioned earlier on Promise, which is a girls' project. It's a Christian project. We are currently most on Insta at the moment because that seems to be where we get most traffic. But just go check us out, really. So it's Promise Conference on Insta. That's just it, nice and simple. And we often put blogs and vlogs on there. You guys have been on there, which is fab. Just really for young girls, really, and those that have young girls in their care, to really just help and encourage them to know their worth and identity. So there's some different Q&As and things coming up on there. I think I've mentioned the message for today. And finally, as the Message Trust, we're putting out a National Youth Conference. So it's accessible to any and all, faith or no faith. And that is Saturday, the 17th of October. You can get that on Facebook or on YouTube.
Absolute dynamite. So all of those details are going to be in the description below. Loads for you to engage in there. I'm going to share just a few thoughts before we close, and then I'm going to ask Lydia to pray for us, as we always do. One thing I've been reading through, revisiting, is The Gospel According to Starbucks by Leonard Sweet, and it's a great little book if you ever get a chance. But just talking about like the real, authentic experience of church. This is what he says, and it just got me thinking as well about the mental health that sometimes we put on the pressure to be the most slick, most presentable, the one with all the answers, the one that takes all the pressure on our shoulders. And actually, Jesus calls us to just be authentic in our relationship with him, and describing, church a little bit like a strawberry cream frappuccino. It looks like it's got real fruit in it, and we're all coffee drinkers here. We get a buzz off those things.
I do.
But as you drink them, you realise there's like 800 calories in them. It's not the real deal, and you probably could have had, like a punnet of strawberries and been loads better for it. However, you don't get the sugar rush. But describing it as church, this is what he says: this is not all that different from worship experiences that can quickly become monsters that need to be fed increasingly elaborate meals every week. And the preacher and the worship team become the food. All of this leads to severe obesity in more ways than one. And it's just quite a powerful little phrase where he's saying that actually we can put on something that looks very close to the genuine article, but all of this effort, and actually we find in it sometimes, is this kind of consumer mentality of church. And we buy into that as leaders, when actually we're called to be authentic in our relationship with Jesus.
Absolutely.
We're called to have a deep rooted foundation in him. And the way that ties into mental health for me is that often we put on that mask that can break us. I've had a couple of burnouts in my 13, 14 years of ministering, and often they've been times when I feel like I need to put on the front. I've got to have all the answers, and recognize that actually we're here by the grace of God, and we do this as a privilege and honor to serve Jesus, but we want the genuine article, and we want to give people the genuine experience of God. And our job is just to bring people to Jesus. And it might be that when we're dealing with our young people over this season, that we walk with them hand in hand. We don't necessarily have all the answers, but we can say, do you know what? I can introduce you to Jesus as well. And I can pray for the peace that surpasses all understanding in all of these things. And so, Lydia, we just want to thank you as well for just the
total privilege. I love chatting to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolute gold. We're so thankful for that. Would you do the honor of praying for us just as we close?
Absolutely. So, Lord Jesus, we just thank you for each of our young people. We thank you that they are yours, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I just pray now that in this really challenging time, that you would provide them with a sense of hope. Would you be an anchor for them, and would you equip and empower us as youth leaders to just be honest and real, to say it's okay when we don't have all the answers, to create safe and meaningful spaces where young people can unpack anything that's troubling them. And would you give us your grace and discernment to know what then to do with that? Amen.
Amen. Hey, if you've enjoyed this, we'd love you to like, share and subscribe to the video as well. And we'd also love for you to drop into the comments and drop onto the website as well. Sign up to our newsletter. We'd love to connect with you, especially if you're a youth leader and a youth pastor, to encourage you to offer you more of this kind of stuff to help you go deeper, live stronger and be empowered. It has been wonderful.
So good.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.